Welcome everyone to the Fall Summit. My name is Marita Esteva. I'm with the Path of Ish. We are talking about green all over, zero waste and the elemental body. And today we are talking with Diana, a good friend of mine. We've known each other for a few years. And Diana, has an amazing background, a bachelor's in environmental studies, and environmental economic policy, a master's in urban planning and community development, a yoga teacher, an activist, and she just received the Volunteer of the Year by the Point Reyes, Association. And so let's kind of dig into this. What is green all over, zero waste in the elemental body? Diane, why don't you give us just a little bit of your background? I kind of gave bachelor's and master's, but why are you here? How did that bring you to this summit, bring you to yoga and kind of that full circle?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I honestly don't even know where to start, so I'm gonna just dive in and hopefully it'll find its course. But, I think my journey, I've always been an environmental activist in some capacity. Like I've always, since I was a kid, kind of saw injustice. Like I was able to see a lot of injustices, and I maybe didn't have the emotional maturity to do anything about it, but I've always sort of thought alternatively. And when I got into college, my first, I wanted to be a feminist when I was in high school. And in my mind, that meant like be the CEO of a big marketing firm so that people would finally listen to me. And, and so I went into college and I was taking like the business courses, and I took my first I took an economics course. And in this economics course, it was like, okay, natural resources go into making products, which then we, supply and demand, and then we make money, and then we like throw it out. And I was like, what's the natural resource? Mm-hmm. What's that? Because this is like, to me, it's just made perfect sense. I was like, why is no one talking about this in economics? So then that's kind of steered me into natural resource economics. And then I was like, oh my gosh, like we're destroying the planet. And so that was like my trajectory getting into environmental work. And so I've always sort of had that, like intellectually, I really understood it, and I studied a lot of theory and concepts. I really got into food justice, where I went to school at Michigan State. Michigan is the second largest agricultural state next to California. And my school was right next to the Capitol, and Lansing, Michigan. And actually the statistic at that time was 70% of Lansing, Michigan gets their food from party stores or corner stores, because it's kind of like a food desert, right? And so unless of course you're affluent or, and like can drive to the like near town to get the good food. And it was so interesting because where I was in a land grant college, it's like there's tons of agriculture, there's tons of food around. I'm like, what is this disconnect here between like, why are we growing all this food, but like in the town next door, which happens to be the state capital, no one's has access to this fresh, healthy food. So that got me into food justice and sustainable agriculture, and that led me into urban planning. Where I moved to Chicago, and this whole time I was doing yoga because emotionally it was just like the only thing that made me feel calm and focused, and it was good to take care of my body. And I always loved the practice of yoga to help me manage my stress. And then when I was in my graduate program doing urban planning, I did my yoga teacher training. I don't know how I did that in grad school, but somehow I found a way.
How did you do that? I have
no problem.
Why not? Just add.
Yeah. And I got so frustrated in the urban planning environment because it felt to me a lot of the same thing. Like I could have all these great ideas, and the community could come together and create these amazing, brilliant ideas of how to support and sustain themselves. But ultimately, the power lies with the system, and the system's broken. And who influences the system are like the big developers and the big corporations. And so even though there was these ways to collaborate and come up with good ideas, I felt like there wasn't a lot of power
Mm.
there. And when I was teaching yoga, or when I was practicing yoga and I did my teacher training, you know, I just felt like, gosh, I have direct, like everyone does yoga. I have access to these decision makers.
Mm-hmm.
And so really that was for me, I felt like I was contributing in a more direct way than trying to develop all these ideas and policies that I felt like just got thrown to the wind. And so I became a full-time yoga teacher, and that was almost 10 years ago.
Wow.
And it's been a journey. And I'll just say one more thing about that is when I moved to California 5 years ago, like at this point, I had been an environmentalist on a purely academic and theoretical way.
Mm-hmm.
And then it wasn't until I moved to California that I camped outside. I actually slept outside in a tent in the trees. And that to me was the moment. It was like I felt so connected to my spirit and my heart, and like this sense of hope and beauty and awe. And I'd only experienced that on my yoga mat before, really, or like, you know, randomly. But and so for me, that was a moment where I was actually in nature, where I feel like I truly became an environmentalist, because it wasn't in my head anymore. I felt it in my body.
Your body.
And it was the yoga practice that allowed me to connect to my body. So I think I maybe really was able to make that shift from intellectual activist to like really being an environmental activist.
Living and breathing it then.
Yeah.
Michigan State, that's awesome. I spent some time there. I remember the ice cream, that there was a whole, like, we would go to the actual Michigan State and buy ice cream because they had like the cows there and everything.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I haven't thought about that in a long time.
That's amazing.
Yeah, the MSU dairy store,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
I'm vegan now, so I wouldn't
So am I.
eat
So
that. But at the time, I ate it, and it was pretty good.
it was pretty good, wasn't it? So now that you've
Yeah.
kind of embodied activism and embodied kind of nature in kind of a new way, I know you and I were talking, you feel that there's two kind of crises happening right now in this time and place. You want to kind of talk about that? Kind of your
Yeah.
I know one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I know I'm not alone in like this complete appall and astonishment of the ecological crisis. It's, you know, it's quite alarming. I think that's part of why we're doing this summit and the climate march and all this stuff. Like, people really care. And, you know, in my opinion, I try to boil it down in this wing, like in this ecological crisis, I really see it as two winged. And one is like, if there's any natural or wild place left, it needs to be protected, defended, and restored, like at all costs. Like if there is nature left, like we need to protect it because it's going fast.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're in what's known as like the sixth mass extinction, right? So any natural place that's around, we need to protect it and defend it at all costs. And the other wing is that mindsets need to shift, especially in the West, like the US and Europe and sort of this like Western industrial complex. Like our mindsets and our consumption patterns and really ultimately it's like capitalism and neoliberals thinking that creates this like consumer nightmare.
Yeah.
Like we need to shift our mindsets on what profit is and what value systems we have and how we spend our time.
Mm-hmm.
um,
I have a quick question. You said, you know, it took you until you actually camped and were in nature for it to move from kind of something intellectual into your body. And so my question is, and it happened later in your life, you know, not everyone grows up camping and in nature, you know, not every, you know, a lot of people grow up in cities and things like that. So
yeah.
do you think,
I mean, that was me.
yeah. So do you think that's a big issue, because in the sense of natural places being protected, people don't understand how important they are because they don't know them. They haven't embodied them, you know? Do you think that's one of the issues that we're dealing with People still kind of people are still running to cities. I mean, if you go across the United States, you can see Houston keeps developing, big city, Chicago, you were there in Chicago, where people are always driving in their car. The way that you react with nature is on a highway. So this industrialization of spaces, this urbanization of spaces, because I know you talk about that, has taken that away from us. So how is it in small ways that we can put it on the hearts and not just the minds of people that this means something, how can we reach
Yeah.
people,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very true. I think cities are designed in a way where we are so disconnected from nature, even though nature supports and sustains all of us all the time. Um, it reminds me of this, it wasn't one of the small theories I learned about in my graduate program, and I'm gonna have to paraphrase it, but essentially it's like a triad. There's three parts to designing space according to this theory. And one part is like the speed of the traveler,
mm-hmm.
which is inversely proportional to the emotional attachment to a space or place, which affects how that space is designed.
Wow.
And so those are like the three prongs there. So for example, if you're traveling very, very fast, like driving in a car going 40 miles an hour, or on an expressway 60, 70 miles an hour, you're traveling very, very fast. So your emotional attachment to that space is actually quite low.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't have time to get invested in a place. And because of that, those spaces are designed in a specific way. So on an expressway, for example, if there is a design element, it's like a big billboard with a word hoping to catch your attention.
Mm-hmm.
But like you don't really care about that billboard, right? You don't have I mean, there's that movie, The Three Billboards, that came out last year, but normally you don't really care about billboards, right?
Yeah, she lives in my town.
Yeah, it was interesting movie. Anyway, so one of the things we can do is slow down, right? So as we slow down our lives, we're naturally more inclined to care or get more invested in the space that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And in turn, that those spaces get designed a little bit differently. So, I mean, walkable communities or bikeable communities. So I think even just the act of slowing down will help you care about a place more. And a natural effect of that is like it gets designed in a way that increases your emotional attachment to it.
Mm-hmm.
So even though, I mean, a lot of people can't leave cities, right? This is their home. Maybe they don't have access to it. They don't have, maybe they're working a big job and they can't afford to take time off work. Like there's so many obstacles that prevent us from going backpacking for a week, or having the courage to you can't maybe buy good hiking shoes or whatever it is, like whatever obstacle you have. But I think just the act of slowing down your life
Mm-hmm.
is going to have a huge impact in your ability to process and become aware of the space you're in, and to find small aspects of beauty.
Yeah. So do you think kind of, yoga slowing you down, and I've participated in outdoor yoga, urban outdoor yoga. Do you think that is a way to kind of reconnect even to an urban environment and kind of embody it in a new way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why so many people in cities are drawn to the practice of yoga,
Mm-hmm.
because it really is a chance for us to reconnect with our body.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a chance for us to slow down and to maybe break these cycles of like, I have to keep going, I have to answer that email, I have to,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is you think you have to do. Yoga in cities is a way where people can start to challenge that and slow down. Whether it's, I mean, outdoor yoga is great too. And I really noticed that shift in people over teaching for a decade, how important it is for people to have time in their schedule where they can challenge the momentum of their life.
I like that, the momentum of their life. Now, I know that you also support a lot of and are inspired by activists out there that are kind of on the ground. I know you mentioned the water protectors in our earlier conversation. Who else is out there that you feel should be supported and that is doing the work on the ground?
Oh gosh. You
And that
know, I
because I know you have connected with a lot of activists. So who who's out there that other people can maybe connect to?
yeah, I mean, I think there's so many amazing causes out there. Like, you know, I've been working with the org Vital Actions. You met Tim, you know, he's down in Nicaragua, that he does a lot of or Vital Actions does a lot of environmental, like strategic eco defense and species extinction work and um, all that stuff. So that's an org I really recommend. But I think there's such cool work going on in the indigenous community with the water protections, like all the anti-pipeline stuff. I look at what's going on in the bayous of Louisiana,
Yeah.
like the new camps
Yeah.
setting up there, and another pipelines going up in Louisiana. Um, I think it has some of the most, next to Texas, it's the second in oil refineries, and so they have a ton of oil pipelines going through them. This is another one, but it happens to be going through one of the biggest wetlands in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And it also happens to be going straight through the town of St. James, which is like a Black community that's very poor, and it's right in Cancer Alley, because in Louisiana there's like a whole area called Cancer Alley because they have the highest cancer rates in the country, so there's this like all the camps that are setting up in that are actually blocking the pipeline from going in. I look to these people because, you know what, policy is great, and I think we need to shift our policy, but it's too slow. If we wait for policy to show up, like oil pipelines are getting built and resources are getting extracted. So I look to all the direct action activists with such admiration and respect for the work that they're doing, to say, hey, I'm not waiting for the government to make this choice. Like, this is the right thing to do, and I'm going to do it. And no government's going to tell me to not do that,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a moral issue. It's not a legal issue. So I look for those people. There's some really cool water activists going on in Michigan too, protecting the Great Lakes. And this shirt I'm wearing too, defend the boundary waters, which is fighting another mining company
Mm-hmm.
up in the boundary waters is up in Wisconsin that borders Canada, so it's international waters. Just there's a lot of really cool activism going on, and I just wish it didn't have to go on.
Yeah, and there's
I
small
wish that the world were just good, but it's not.
and
So,
there's small things that we can do every day. It's funny. I travel over the country, and I was just recently in Minnesota, and to have conversations with them about water conservation, they're like, why should I have so much water? So it's interesting when you go into states and cities that it's not even on their mind. I mean, a lot of cities still don't recycle. It's not on their mind because it's going to cost them too much. I remember, I think it was in North Carolina or South Carolina, like, no, it's going to cost us too much to do this, so we're just going to throw it away. So it's when I was in Minnesota, I was like, well, you can do simple things like turn the water off when you're brushing your teeth. Like, water is a global conversation, but it's hard to get people to have that conversation when they're like, I got the Great Lakes there, I got this water here. So what is it that we can do on a day-to-day, do you think, to have these conversations, or to put it really out there?
yeah, I wish I had an answer
Yeah.
for
Right.
that. I have started, I've transitioned to a zero waste lifestyle. I'm not perfect. I feel like I have to define what zero waste means to me.
Mhm.
And recognizing that I am a human being and I'm in a broken system, so I'll never have zero impact. Like,
Yeah.
zero impact is really false, but I can certainly raise my own consciousness and try to minimize my impact as much as I can, and challenge myself in the ways I think I don't have impact. um, and I've noticed that just by being vocal about what I'm doing, like in these small ways, like, I think it goes unseen and unheard, but I have, over the course of, the last year, gotten random emails and people telling me like, hey, like, I switched, like, I'm now making my own toothpaste, or like, hey, like, I tried making my own oat milk now, or, whatever it is. So people do see it happening. So even if you think like, oh, no one's like, um, I'll bring my own Tupperware when I go out I'll bring my own mug, and it seems so small, like this drop in the bucket, and in a lot of ways it is. And I'm like, what the F is the point of this? Like, it's so small.
Yeah.
But I think people are watching.
Yeah.
I think people are, even if their minds are somewhere else and it's not on their radar, they see it happening.
Yeah.
And so there's something really deep, like I think maybe that is our connection to the earth. Even if you're so disconnected from your own connection to the earth, we are connected to the earth because we are her.
Yeah, correct.
And so even if you're so far away from that truth, it's still there. And so if you see somebody in a way that's more aligned, like,
it resonates.
It still reaches you.
Yeah.
I think.
And I think it also makes people say, oh, someone's doing it. It is possible, because you could read all the Facebook and the Instagram. You're like, okay, that's cute, right? But how does this really work? Again, I travel a lot. And I remember when I was thinking about becoming plant-based, I was like, how am I going to do this? I'm going to starve.
I know.
And you and I, we like to eat a lot. So I was like, how is this happen? And I thought about it for months and months and months and did a lot of research, and it's becoming much more easier to do that, but just small things. So funny. The other day I was doing my expenses and I got my expenses back because they're like, why are you eating green beans in the morning for your breakfast? And I was like, I'm plant-based. Like, that's what my body needs. But then I'm like thinking, well, I'm glad someone caught that, because maybe it opened up a door to have a conversation, and that person will be like, oh, well, that's a different habit. I never thought that, And so I think, as you said, embodying it, being it is the greatest thing that you can do. And then, as you said, nature speaks to nature, heart speaks to heart. Yeah. So I know you said there was a second wing, and that's capitalism and consumerism. So people could be like, oh my God, what a cute mug. I want one, right? And so at least maybe they'll consume their way into zero waste. I don't know, right? But you want to.
Yeah, well, I think that's actually like such a huge issue that I have such conflict with, is like in veganism and in zero waste stuff. Like, it's like capitalism can infiltrate anything and ruin it. And I just see this, and it happened and is happening with yoga too, right? Like the commodification of anything. Like, you can't buy your way into being an awesome yogi.
Yeah.
You can't buy your way into being like a good person. You just have to be a good person. And so I see a lot of, $10 bricks of vegan cheese, and I'm like, that it's tastes really good, but like, I cannot be buying that all the time.
Yeah.
And that's still, it's like the profit driven model of growth. And I'll see, a mason jar being sold for like $8, and like to put, so that it looks nice on like I'm like, you can't buy your way into having like this perfect, beautiful kitchen. Like, that's part of like the wiring that I'm trying to dismantle in myself and unshackle in myself, is like, I don't have to look a certain way or do it a certain way. And like, I can't just keep spending my resources trying to like appear like I'm this way. Like, I just have to live it in the way that it makes sense to me. So I think the commodification of these things is like, I really try to keep a watchful eye on. I'm not perfect at it, but I try. The second wing, right? Switching mindsets. Yeah. Right. So like, I think that's where like a true yoga practice, I always say I love the yoga practice, I hate the yoga industry. Like,
yeah.
So I like to differentiate those two things. But I really just, for me, it's a constant practice of looking in and questioning like, what is really important to me, and like really starting to unpack some of these deeply ingrained things that keep me stuck in a broken system. Right? Like, I don't actually have to buy like the fancy glass jar,
Mhm.
to become zero waste. Like I can just, like, I have this old plastic Tupperware, so I'm just going to use this because this is what I have, and it doesn't, like, I, look fancy, but, and it's still plastic. But like, who cares? Like, I'm not purchasing, like, I don't have to purchase anything. I don't have to, like, buy something that I don't need to buy. I think creates a lot of capitalism creates scarcity,
Mhm.
and because of scarcity, we fear that we don't have enough, and so we're constantly taught to, like, grab on for more and get more and get more, and to hoard because, like, we think we don't have enough. And so these are sort of and it's usually oppressive, right? Like, I'll get more at the expense of other people or the planet. And that's, if I really look at my actions and what I need, it's like, I actually don't need that much.
Mhm.
It feels freeing to me. So
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's my question is then, since yoga connects us to our body and earth is in our body, is there specific yoga practices or things that you've done? I mean, I can think of like a tree, that can kind of embody the elements inside of us to kind of connect in that way. I know that you do a yoga and hike retreat, which is one of these days I will go. But is there, can we bring that? Can we bring the elements into yoga in kind of a new way? And do you have any examples
yeah,
in your own practice of how you do that?
yeah. I mean, I think, you know, in one way, I feel like there's no way we can't bring those things into our practice in our daily lives because it's like it's so interwoven.
Yeah.
But in a more, like, to bring more consciousness and awareness to it, there's a ton of practices. And yeah, one of my favorite things, there's two projects that I love doing, and like one you mentioned is like the yoga and backpacking and yoga and hiking retreats. Those to me are some of the ways in which we can start reconnecting to nature and being outside. And I like saying it in a way of like, in a yoga studio, because it's, in an enclosed space and there's flat grounds and there's all the props and you go to it on a regular basis. It's very comfortable, actually. It's like a safe, comfortable space. And when you are not, and because of that, you're able to go pretty deep in your own sort of reactions. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm in a posture, and now I'm like, I can go in and look at my reaction to the posture, and I can feel my breath and I can feel my body. And, I can start to discern the difference between pain and discomfort. And I can create a lot of space around discomfort. And I can, if something's in pain, I can, like, go through my mental processes and get out of pain. So there's all these cool things that happen in a yoga studio. Um, and then when I go do these yoga backpacking retreats, like, there's nothing safe about the backpacking retreats. Like, we're hiking like all day. We're carrying everything on our backs that we need. It's uncomfortable. Like, you don't know what the elements are going to bring. Like, there's no even ground. So when we do our yoga practice out there, it's like, um, it's really quite uncomfortable. And because of that, like, you can't control the elements. You can't control the weather. You can learn about patterns and try to prepare, but ultimately when you're outside, um, it's a lot more surrender,
Hmm.
and you have to face a different part of yourself and a different part of your reaction. And I think both are so important. So I love doing the backpacking trips because, um, one, it's empowering for people, myself included, I'll just speak from my point of view. It's empowering for me to see what I'm capable of, and to see that I actually can go out into nature and, um, sort of like challenge my body in that way. And if I get rained on, I get rained on. And if I have to cross a river and I, get water up to my waist, like, okay, I have water up to my waist. Like, if it gets a little bit cold, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be a little bit cold, but I have like these tools or skill sets that I can take care of myself in. And it makes me feel like then I can be out in nature and see its beauty and not be so scared of it. And I'm with, I'm not there out by myself, like out like in the deep wilderness. Like I work with a guide. His name's Duncan, works with Off Trail on Track. And he's like, so there is a little level of safety I have where I'm like, he has so much more experience. So I can really, go a little bit further. But it's a way to just see like, okay, maybe some of my fears they're not true. It's just I don't have the experience, and this is something I can relearn and reconnect to. And so I love doing that for myself, and I love taking people out there. And there's a type of bond that happens with a group of people when you go through something insane and then you survive. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, so you work in tech and you like, I don't have anything in common with you, but like all of a sudden we're out there, we've survived this thing. And now all of a sudden, like all those differences don't matter. And like, we're connecting on this really deep personal level. And then we enjoy this incredible sunrise over a lake, and there's just nothing but mountains and trees around. Right. So it's like all this external stuff that makes me think I'm separate than you has disappeared. And then it makes me think like, was that ever real to begin with?
Yeah.
It's like this really cool experience.
Awesome. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit of what you're doing in Point Reyes. You want to share with us kind of why did you start doing it? It was just kind of you and a dream, and then you got people out there and you drive them out there, and there's small things that we can do, so.
Yeah. So what I do in Point Reyes is it's once a month, and it's a volunteer event. And, Point Reyes is a biological hotspot. It contains 15% of all California biodiversity right there in the park, which is incredible. Certain stuff, that's the only place it exists on the whole planet. And like everywhere, it's like threatened. Like a lot of species out there are threatened or endangered. And so it's a little bit strategic of a place to work in. But I didn't know that when I first started working there. I started working there because that was the first place I ever camped, and I thought it was beautiful. I had that first awakening, and I just wanted to learn more and get more involved. And my schedule is odd as a yoga teacher, so I was like, none of their volunteer opportunities matched my schedule on a regular basis. So I was like, hey, I called them. I was like, hey, I want to volunteer. None of your opportunities work. What can I do? And after 6 months of like getting tossed around from different person to different person, I finally found someone there who was willing to start a project with me. And the idea was that it's too resource intensive for them to do a whole nother project for just one person. So I agreed that I would try to get groups of people out, because I am a yoga teacher. I have access to people. And like, if I just say, I'm going to teach a yoga class out here, people might come. And so, once a month I take a group of people out, and we go into a protected area, and we work on, there's this incredible dune restoration project. I didn't know what a healthy dune ecosystem looked like until I started going out there. But I'll go into do we have time to, I'll explain it fast.
We have time.
So there's like,
don't worry, we got time.
Okay, great. So in the dunes, like back when colonialism happened and Westerners came over, right? Ranchers came in and took over the land, right? So there's like, that's kind of like a dark history of like, pushing out indigenous people for cattle, to raise cattle, right? This is our history. So when the ranchers came and they pushed out all the native people, and they started their cattle ranches, one thing that they noticed was that, oh, I'm right by these sand dunes and all the sand keeps coming into my pasture. And so what they did was that they planted beach grass, European beach grass in the dunes, to stabilize the dunes so that sand wouldn't flow into their pastures. So they planted this grass, and it took over, and it's an invasive grass. It's not native here. So what it did was that it grew really, really thick because the roots are about 12 feet deep. And so it grows thick and dense, and it basically squashed out any other native plant that was there as well. And it stabilized the dunes, and then the pastures could be better, more economic. And so this grass has taken over the dunes, all the other native plants, and therefore the native animals don't have habitat. So there's just like been a huge species loss. In 2011, the park got a grant to remove some of the beach grass. And so they took mechanical gear and they dug up the sand 15 feet. They got rid of all the grass and saw what happened. And then what happened was, there's lots of different theories, but potentially having turned over like the sand that deep, maybe some ancient seeds got brought up to the surface, and this endangered plant came back that's called Tidstrom's lupin, which there's lots of lupins around. This one's very specific to this area. There's only 16 populations, and the biggest population is like right here in the dunes. And what it does is that it fixates nitrogen into the sand, and then other plants and animals started to come back. But with that much disturbance, like other invasive species came back or like started to infiltrate as well. And so what I do is I go in with a group of people and we take out what's called European sea rocket, which it's actually a really pretty plant. It's part of the mustard family. It's kind of pretty, but what it does is that it latches on to the Tidstrom's lupin and it sucks out all the nutrients. It gets really big and it shades out the lupins, and then they both die. And this can happen in a couple months. So it's actually quite an aggressive plant that is sort of decimating that area again. And for whatever reason, a couple of years ago, there was a huge population explosion, probably because it's supposed to be an annual plant, but because the temperature is so moderate, it just keeps seeding and seeding and seeding and seeding. So
everything grows in California, right?
Everything grows in California. Yeah, so I'll just go out there. We literally just pull out the plant, the European sea rocket plant, to give the lupins a lot more breathing room. And over the past couple of years doing that, it's been really, really successful. I've noticed like a huge difference year to year. We haven't planted anything new there. Like it's not like we haven't planted anything, but all sorts of super rare wildflowers have come back.
Wow.
And the snowy plovers are nesting, and this really endangered butterflies come back. And it's not a perfect thing, like it requires constant effort, but it's largely a volunteer run restoration effort. So it's been a really cool experience. And what is also really cool about it is taking the group out, like it's like we can cover a lot of ground with 10 or 20 people. And so we cover a lot of ground, and then we have lunch together on the beach, and then I teach a yoga class. And it's like this really perfect balance of being outside, connecting with nature, paying some reparations, and fixing some of the human impacts that we've caused, and playing and enjoying it. Right? It's like this gorgeous ecosystem, and it's, basically a little private beach, and it's been really lovely.
Yeah, and it gets
one of my favorite things.
Gets people out of San Francisco. I remember I went once and someone had never seen a cow before, and I was like, "What?" So.
You went on my very first one. That was the first one.
I remember. It
was a small group. And we were doing ice plants back then too, and that was really hard.
Yeah, small but mighty. But yeah. So we're kind of going to start wrapping it up a little bit, but I know that you wanted to share kind of some of your mindfulness, maybe breath techniques in a minute for everyone who's still watching, and thank you for everyone for watching and taking the time. One of the things that you talked a lot about is access, and some people don't have access to yoga studios. Yoga can be expensive. I mean a yoga class these days is going for $30. Rent a mat, $2 to $5, water, towel. You're about sometimes $40 in. And so how can we take this mindfulness practice, this practice of being in the moment, and not commercialize it and still be an activist in it. So do you have any ideas? And then we can definitely go into your breath meditation. So if you'd like to.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the access, I wish I had an answer, and I don't. There are donation-based yoga studios. There's pros and cons to them. They're usually very crowded, and usually the quality of the instruction I've heard isn't as good. Although I'm sure that depends on who's teaching at these places. And I just, YouTube, and there's a lot of free stuff online you can get, but again, that requires you to have a phone or a computer or internet access too. So I think I try to do free events as often as I can, and I find that when I do free or donation-based events, it's still the people who can afford to pay are coming. I think it's a multi-faceted solution that needs to happen, and unfortunately, I don't have an answer for that other than, ask, hey, I want to do this and I can't afford it. And there are people who care, who will help you. Like, you can do work trade at yoga studios, or you can go to community centers and find a group to do yoga in, or if you can contact me and I'll try to help look for you, like what resources are in your town. Like, I can ask around. I know a lot of people in a lot of cities, and I think it is in being talked about a lot more. And but no, I don't know of any straight up solutions to that other than be vocal and ask. And the practice really does heal. It's so preventative. So even though you might have to pay a little bit of money in some situations, like, you're preventing so many other health issues that can come up. Like, it's so preventative, as far as stress and anxiety and mobility in your back and joints and all that. It really, I don't like saying it in these terms, like it saves money in the long run, but I think it does.
Yeah.
For health stuff. Same with like eating a plant-based diet and a vegan diet. Like, if you eat healthy, and you do a little yoga, like, your body isn't going to break down as fast. You're not going to have to be as dependent on certain pills, and you'll save on healthcare and medical bills and all this stuff. So,
and I think it switches you from that I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I have enough, but to find the bounty inside of you. And some of just finding bounty inside of you is breath exercise. So would you want to lead us through kind of a simple breath exercise? This is yoga. Yeah, yoga is breath. And so these are simple things that anyone can do. Doesn't really cost to breathe, not yet. So another conversation.
Yeah, the breath is, I mean, a lot of times when I teach even to private clients, like, a lot of what we do is breath work and pranayama. Pranayama is breath practice. And I always like to say, like, you always have your breath. You've had your breath since the day you were born, and you will have your breath until the day you die. Right? So there's not a single moment of your life where you don't have access to this, regardless of your ability or how much money you make, or anything like that. Like, you always have your breath. So, and it's our link between inner world and external world. Like, it's literally that link. So yeah, I would love to offer just a short guided pranayama practice.
Do it.
All right. So if you're at home or wherever you are, you can just, if sitting isn't comfortable for you, you can lie down. But the hope is to have your heart space a little open without going into intense back bend. Yeah. So for a lot of us, just even thinking about lifting the heart, and if the shoulders are forwards, just maybe draw them back a little bit.
Mine are always forward.
Mine too. And then you want to be able to tuck your chin a little bit and lift the back of your skull up. And so from there, if you can close your eyes, you can close your eyes. But even more important than that is a soft quality to your eyes. So if you were to have the eyes open, you're not looking at anything. There's softness there. And just kind of feel your feet on the ground. And feel where your hands are resting, whether they're open or closed, or if they're touching or not touching. Where are your hands? Notice any sounds in the room you're in or the space you're in. If you can hear anything, without judging it as good or bad, or I like it or I don't like it. Just observing sound. And then just before we even begin a breath practice, notice any information in your body that tells you that you are breathing. Like whether that's feeling your chest rise and fall, or feeling breath through your nostrils. Like, how do you know you're breathing right now? And take a deep, slow inhale. When you get to the top, hold your breath just for a moment. Try to stay relaxed. And open mouth exhale. And just do that one more time. Inhale slow, taking your time. Fill up every little nook and cranny. And hold your breath at the top for a moment. Stay relaxed. And open mouth exhale. And inhale through the nose, slow. Feel that little pause at the top. The breath turns around, and then exhale through your nose, slow. Without forcing it out, just smooth. And pause at the bottom, feel the breath turn around, and we do it again. Inhale. There's a little pause at the top. And exhale. And there's a little pause at the bottom. Inhale. Hold your breath for a moment at the top. Feel the breath turn around. Exhale through the nose. And pause at the bottom. And adding some counting. Inhale through the nose, count 4, 3, 2, 1. Pause. Exhale 4, 3, 2, 1. Pause. Inhale 4, 3, 2, 1. Pause. Exhale 4, 3, 2, 1. Pause. Inhale 4, 3, 2, 1. Pause. Exhale 4, 3, 2, 1. Pause. Inhale 4. Pause. Exhale 4. Pause. Just do that 3 times on your own. Maybe you want to count faster or slower, but the practice here is samavriti, equal turning. You take in as much as you give back. Take 2 more rounds of breath. And after you finish your second breath, just release any techniques and just maybe observe the effects, letting your breath be natural, no control or effort, but still observing. And place your left hand on your heart. Just feeling your palm make contact with the heart space. And put your right hand on top of that. And just lift the heart up into your hands. Feel your breath. And open your eyes if they're closed.
It was beautiful. Thank you. I loved taking and the recycling. You know, you take in and you let go of the same amount of energy and things like that. Very apropos for our whole conversation of green all over, zero waste, and the elemental body. And we will definitely put a link to your website so people can see what you're up to, and your Instagram. I know you travel and you do crazy things like ride your bike from Seattle to California and raise funds for water protectors. And I know you travel to Chicago, and you've been traveling a little bit around the world. So hopefully we can connect and make sure more people connect with you. And thank you so much, Diana, for your time today. And we'll see each other soon. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Marita.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.